we've gotten some really cool reports lately, but this one on the global slewing ring bearings market,
Yeah,
this one looks particularly interesting.
I know, right?
Now, when you first hear bearings,
Yeah,
you probably think of something kind of small, you know,
right.
unassuming.
Uh-huh.
But these things are like the unsung heroes in some seriously massive machinery.
They really are.
I mean, we're talking huge construction equipment, mining machinery, even those gigantic wind
Yeah,
turbines.
you don't really think about it
You
until,
know,
you need to rotate something that big.
yeah.
It's impressive.
So our goal today is to really cut through all this data in this market report and pull out the truly important insights.
Yeah, like the stuff that might surprise you.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really relevant for anyone who wants to quickly grasp, where this market stands right now and where it's heading.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think that's key. We don't want to just drown people in numbers. We
right.
want to highlight the key trends and the sheer scale of this industry because it is enormous.
It is. And speaking of scale, one of the first things that jumps out is the estimated global market size for slewing ring bearings in 2025.
Oh, yeah, that's a big number.
It's around USD 970 million.
That's almost $5 billion.
So yeah, that gives you a sense of the scale we're talking about here. And the thing is, it's not a static market.
Not at all.
The projections show some pretty impressive growth coming up.
Yeah, they really do. By 2033, the market is forecast to hit USD 727.39 million,
Wow.
which means a compound annual growth rate of 5.50% from 2025 to 2033.
So yeah, healthy growth, a really robust and expanding market.
Yeah, definitely a sector to watch.
Now, just to be clear, we're working with excerpts from some market reports here. What kind of information are these reports giving us?
So we're looking at data on market size, current projected growth estimates, and importantly, we're also getting a breakdown by different geographical regions,
Okay.
different applications for the bearings and the factors
Wow.
driving all this growth.
Right, so it paints a pretty comprehensive picture.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so let's get into it then.
Okay. What's the big story here? What are the fundamental forces driving this global market?
Well, the reports are all pretty consistent on this.
Yeah.
The main driver, the primary engine of growth, is the increasing use of heavy machinery,
Okay.
particularly in construction and mining.
Right. Makes sense.
Yeah, think about all the excavators, bulldozers, mining trucks operating globally.
Oh, yeah.
Every single one of those relies on these sophisticated bearings for crucial rotational movement.
Right. You see those massive machines in action, and you can tell
Yeah.
they need really durable and reliable components
Absolutely.
at their core.
It's all about heavy-duty performance.
Yeah, but it can't just be about those traditional heavy industries, can it?
No, you're right.
There must be other factors contributing to this growth as well.
Absolutely. The demand for automation is accelerating across tons of industries.
Right.
And that's a major driver for the slewing ring bearings market.
Of course. Yeah, as manufacturing, logistics, agriculture, everything becomes more automated.
Exactly.
You need more and more precise and dependable rotary motion. Yeah, and that's exactly where slewing ring bearings excel.
Automation is everywhere now, so which sectors are seeing the biggest impact?
Well, industrial robotics is a big one, obviously.
Okay.
Think about the complex movements that robotic arms need to make.
Right.
They rely heavily on high-performance slewing ring bearings.
Okay.
Then you've got automated cranes, material handling systems in warehouses and factories.
Mm-hmm.
That's another significant growth area.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's renewable energy,
Oh, right. Yeah.
especially wind turbines.
Yeah. Those blades are huge.
Enormous. And to keep those rotating smoothly and reliably,
Yeah.
you need very large and specialized slewing ring bearings.
It's amazing how this seemingly niche component is vital to so many cutting-edge technologies.
It is, isn't it?
It's true. So are there any challenges that we should be aware of?
Well, the reports do mention a few restraints.
Okay.
One is the initial cost.
Right.
High-quality slewing ring bearings could be pretty expensive.
Sure, especially for smaller companies.
Yeah, that's a factor. And then there's ongoing maintenance.
Uh-huh.
That can also be a challenge.
Makes sense.
And then another thing is that the market is vulnerable to fluctuations in raw material prices.
Right, steel especially.
Yeah, exactly.
So economic considerations and the price of steel. Okay, what about trends?
Okay, well, two major trends stand out.
Okay.
Firstly, the continued growth of the renewable energy sector.
So that's wind power primarily.
Yeah, that's right. It's an ongoing and significant driver.
Okay, and the second trend?
There's a rising demand for slewing ring bearings that are both lightweight and offer high durability.
Okay.
And these are specifically tailored for industrial automation.
Right, because as robots and automated systems get more sophisticated,
Exactly.
they need to operate with greater speed and efficiency.
Exactly.
So the demands on the components, including the bearings,
Yeah,
become much tougher.
they do.
Interesting. So lightweight, yet incredibly durable. That's like the holy grail of engineering in so many fields.
Yeah, it's a common challenge for sure.
It is. Okay, so let's talk geography now. How does this market break down
Well,
geographically?
as it stands, North America has the biggest share of the global market, over 40% of the revenue in 2025.
Wow.
That's a market size of USD 1988.000 million.
Wow, that's huge.
It is. But what's interesting is, although it's the largest market,
Yeah.
the projected growth rate, a CAGR of 3.7% from 2025 to 2033,
Okay.
is actually a bit slower than some other regions.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the strong, well-established demand from the construction industry in North America is a key factor in its current dominance.
Okay, so North America is the leader at the moment,
Uh-huh.
driven by a strong construction sector. How does that picture look when we break it down by country?
Well, the United States is obviously the leader within North America.
Yeah.
It's projected to have a market size of USD 1,468.53 million in 2025 and a TIGR of 3.5%.
Okay.
Canada comes next with a market size of USD 238.56 million and a slightly higher growth rate of 4.5%.
Okay.
And then you've got Mexico at USD 180.91 million, showing a similar growth trajectory with a KGR of 4.2%.
So the U.S. is the biggest, but Canada and Mexico are showing slightly more dynamic expansion.
That's right.
Interesting. Okay, what about Europe? How does that compare?
Europe holds a pretty significant share of the global market, a little over 30%,
It's okay.
with a market size of USD 1491.00 million in 2025.
Okay.
Their anticipated growth is a CAGR of 4.0% from 2025 to 2033.
Okay.
And much like the global trends, investments in renewable energy initiatives across Europe are a big factor in driving that growth.
Okay, so Europe is a strong second, and the push towards renewables is giving them a boost. Are there any particular countries in Europe that stand out?
Well, the UK has a projected market size of USD 250.49 million in 2025
Yeah.
and a notable CAGR of 4.8%.
Okay.
Germany is the biggest single market in Europe at USD 295.11 million with a growth rate of 4.2%.
Okay.
Russia follows with a market size of USD 231.11 million, although its projected growth is more modest at 3.0%.
Okay.
And then there's also significant markets in France, Italy, and Spain,
Right.
each exceeding USD 120 million in 2025. And then you've got a bunch of other European nations that contribute to the overall market.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see the varying growth rates across the different European countries. Let's shift our focus now to Asia Pacific,
Okay.
a region that often shows very dynamic growth across many sectors.
Yeah, it does.
What's the story there?
So Asia Pacific currently accounts for about 23% of the global slewing ring bearings market,
Okay.
with a market size of USD 1,143.1 million in 2025.
Okay, so a decent chunk.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really interesting.
All right.
This region is projected to have the fastest growth globally, with a CAGR of 7.5% from 2025 to 2033.
Wow, 7.5%. That's some serious expansion.
It is, and the main factors driving this are rapid expansion in manufacturing infrastructure development through construction and the push for renewable energy.
Wow, so those are some major global trends converging.
They really are.
It definitely sounds like Asia Pacific is the region to watch for future development. So which countries in that region are leading the charge?
While China is the biggest single market within Asia Pacific, with a projected size of USD 480.10 million in 2025 and a robust KGR of 7.0%.
Okay.
But India is showing even faster growth, a KGR of 9.3%, and a 2025 market size of USD 137.17 million.
Wow, 9.3%. That is huge.
It really highlights the pace of industrialization and infrastructure development happening there.
Absolutely.
And then you've got Japan with a 2025 market size of USD 157.75 million and a KGR of 6.0%.
Mm-hmm.
And South Korea, Australia, the rapidly developing Southeast Asian nations,
Yeah.
they all represent significant markets with healthy growth trajectories.
So it seems like Asia Pacific is really the one to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how those trends play out in the coming years.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we've covered North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific.
Uh-huh.
What about Latin America and the Middle East and Africa? How do they fit into this global picture?
Okay, so Latin America holds just over 5% of the global market share,
Okay.
with a market size of USD 248.5 million in 2025
Okay.
and a projected CGR of 4.9%.
Okay, so steady growth.
Yeah, and that's largely driven by increasing investments in infrastructure projects across the region.
Right, infrastructure spending, another sector closely linked to the demand for these bearings.
Exactly.
What about the Middle East and Africa?
So that region currently has about 2% of the global market,
Okay.
estimated at USD 99.40 million in 2025,
Okay.
with a projected CGR of 5.2%.
Okay, and what's driving that?
Well, the expanding oil and gas sector is playing a role,
Right.
coupled with growth in construction and the adoption of more heavy machinery.
Okay.
And the GCC countries and South Africa are the most significant markets within that region.
So we're seeing a pretty diverse range of growth drivers across the globe, right? So it's clear that while North America and Europe are the current market leaders,
Yes.
Asia Pacific is the engine of future
Oh,
growth.
yeah, that's right.
And Latin America and the Middle East and Africa are also showing steady expansion driven by their own specific economic needs.
Exactly.
Okay, great. So we've talked about the overall market size, the major growth drivers, and the regional breakdown.
Right.
But the market reports go deeper than that, right?
Yeah, they do.
They break things down by categories like ball versus roller bearing standard versus precision slew types.
Yeah.
All sorts of interesting segments. So let's dive into some of those highlights.
Okay.
Sounds
Go ahead.
good. So let's start with the basic types of bearings. We've got ball bearings and roller bearings. What's the story there?
So right now, roller slewing ring bearings are dominant.
Okay.
They have the biggest share of the market.
And why is that?
Well, it's largely due to their ability to handle really heavy loads,
Okay.
and they're incredibly durable.
Yeah, we're talking about those big applications, right?
Exactly. Construction equipment, mining machinery, wind turbines.
Those are some seriously tough machines.
The roller bearings are the real workhorses in terms of load capacity.
Yeah, it makes sense that they'd be the most popular choice for those applications.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, the retort also mentioned that another type of bearing is experiencing faster growth.
Yeah, that's right. Ball slewing ring bearings are the fastest growing category.
Okay, and what's driving that growth?
Well, ball bearings are known for their versatility and precision,
Okay.
which makes them perfect for things like robotics, automated material handling, and even some medical equipment.
Interesting.
And the increasing demand for automation and the trend towards smaller, more efficient machinery
Yeah.
are the main drivers behind this growth in the ball bearing segment.
Okay, that makes sense. As technology gets more advanced and requires more accuracy,
Right.
the advantages of ball bearings become more clear.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got ball versus roller. Now, what about slew type standard versus precision?
So the standard slew type currently has the largest share of the market.
Okay.
And again, that reflects its widespread use in traditional heavy-duty applications,
Right.
where pinpoint accuracy might not be the top priority.
Okay,
They're reliable and cost-effective.
makes sense.
However, the precision slew segment is experiencing the most rapid growth.
Interesting. And why is that?
Well, it's tied to the rising demand for high-accuracy machinery
Okay.
in sectors like robotics, aerospace engineering, and medical devices.
Right, where even tiny errors can have big consequences.
Yeah, exactly.
So standard for the big jobs, precision for the really intricate stuff?
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, the report also talked about catalog standard versus customized solutions.
Yeah, so catalog standard bearings are currently dominant,
Oh,
simply because they're cost-effective and readily available.
makes sense.
They're a good solution for a lot of applications, particularly in construction and mining, where standardized equipment is common.
Right.
But the customized solutions segment is the fastest growing.
Okay, and what's driving that?
Well, it reflects the increasing trend towards specialized machinery
Okay.
in fields like robotics, aerospace, medical technology, where off-the-shelf components often can't meet those very specific requirements.
So again, it's this move towards greater precision and customization
Exactly.
that's really pushing innovation in this sector.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so we've talked about types of bearings and slew types. The report also breaks things down by the size of the slewing rings.
Yeah, that's right. So the segment for slewing rings with a bore size between 400 and 1,000 millimeters,
Okay.
that currently has the biggest share of the market.
Okay, and why is that size range so popular?
Well, it's incredibly versatile.
Okay.
Those bearings are used in all sorts of construction equipment and general industrial machinery.
Okay.
However, the segment for bearings with a bore size below 400 millimeters is showing the fastest growth.
Okay, and what's driving that?
Well, it's directly related to the growth of smaller, more compact and precise machinery,
Right.
particularly in robotics and medical applications.
So again, the trend towards smaller, more precise components driving growth in specific areas.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the types, the sizes now. Let's talk about the actual applications. Where are these bearings being used the most?
Well, unsurprisingly, construction machinery is the biggest application right now, just given the sheer volume of heavy equipment being used globally.
Makes sense.
But robotics is the fastest growing application.
Okay.
They're essential for providing the precise, low-friction rotational movement that robotic arms and other articulated systems need.
So robotics is really a key area for the future growth of this market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, what other applications are significant?
Well, you've got industrial machinery in general,
Mm.
the renewable energy sector, mining and metals, aerospace, and defense medical systems, machine tools. It's a pretty diverse range.
Wow, that's a lot of industry.
Yeah, it's pretty fundamental technology.
So it's clear that these bearings are really essential to a vast array of industries, both traditional and emerging.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so final question. How are these bearings actually getting to the companies that need them?
Okay, so right now, direct sales from manufacturers to end users.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest distribution channel.
Okay.
And that makes sense for the major industries like construction, mining, renewable energy.
Right, because manufacturers can work directly with their clients.
They provide customized solutions and support.
Yeah. But the indirect sales segment, which involves distributors and intermediaries,
Yeah.
that's actually experiencing the fastest growth.
Interesting. Why is that?
It suggests a growing need to reach a more diverse and potentially smaller customer base,
Okay.
particularly in sectors like robotics and aerospace, where manufacturers need to connect with a wider range of clients.
So direct sales for the big players, indirect channels for reaching those newer, more specialized markets.
That's right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Market size growth drivers,
Yeah.
regional breakdown,
Yeah.
and the various segmentation highlights. But the market reports also give us a glimpse into the competitive landscape.
Uh-huh.
What's happening with the companies in this space?
So it's a highly competitive market,
Okay.
and the key players are really focused on innovation and expansion to strengthen their position.
Okay, can you give us some examples?
Sure. So SKF, a major player in this market, they recently partnered with Goldwind in China.
To implement a smart energy management system at one of their factories,
Interesting.
showing their commitment to sustainability.
Okay.
And then you've got Schaeffler.
Mhm.
They expanded their production capacity in China by opening a new facility that specifically focuses on making large-sized bearings
Okay.
for things like wind turbines and other heavy industrial applications.
So clearly those companies see the strategic importance of both the renewable energy sector and the Chinese market.
Absolutely. They're making big investments in those areas.
Okay, so it seems like we're seeing a lot of activity and innovation in this market.
Yeah, definitely. It's a dynamic space.
Okay, so let's step back for a second. What would you say is the key takeaway for someone who wants to understand this global slewing ring bearings market?
Well, the main takeaway is that this market is growing significantly,
Okay.
driven mainly by the continued growth of heavy industries and the rising adoption of automation.
Makes sense.
While traditional heavy machinery applications like in construction and mining, they still make up the biggest chunk of the market.
Right.
The most dynamic growth is expected in segments like ball bearings, precision slew types applications in robotics, and geographically within Asia-Pacific.
Okay, so the big tough applications are still important,
Uh-huh.
but the future growth seems to be shifting towards those smaller, more precise applications.
Right.
And with Asia leading the way.
Exactly. And the regional analysis is really clear on that. North America and Europe are the established leaders,
Right.
but Asia-Pacific is the high-growth region to watch.
Got it.
Latin America and the Middle East and Africa.
Yeah.
They also present decent opportunities.
Driven by their own specific development needs.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. So to wrap things up, it's fascinating how this component that most people probably never even think about
I know.
is so critical to so many important industries and emerging technologies.
Amazing, isn't it?
It really is. And considering this rising demand for both power in those heavy industries and precision and automation, it begs the question, what completely new applications might we see for slewing ring bearings in the future?
All right.
You know, beyond the sectors that we've discussed already, as technology keeps advancing, could we see these components popping up in fields that we haven't even considered yet?
That's a really interesting question to think about. As we see breakthroughs in advanced robotics with more complex movements,
Yeah.
more sophisticated AI-driven machinery, and even future transportation technologies.
Right.
That fundamental need for reliable and precise rotational movement,
Right.
it's only going to become more important.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's very possible that we'll see new and unexpected applications for slewing ring bearings emerge in the years to come.
Definitely something to keep an eye on. Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this deep dive.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
It was really interesting, and I feel like I have a much better understanding of this market now.
I'm glad to hear that.
So to everyone listening out there, we hope you found this deep dive informative and insightful. As always, we encourage you to dig deeper into the topics that we've discussed today.
Yeah, and let us know what you find.
Absolutely. We're always looking for new and interesting insights into the world of technology and innovation.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.